I am not the world's best public speaker, so if you want to check your cell phones or things like that as I'm speaking, that's quite all right. They also told us we weren't allowed to have notes, so because I'm not a big technology person with PowerPoint, I cheated and used the PowerPoint to be my notes. So I figured if you're looking at me, I'm looking at the PowerPoint, and then I'm not nervous, and we're all good. So that was my plan. My big thing in life, I think, is finding the win in everything, and that certainly applies with disruption. When I was asked to speak and I thought about that word disruption, the first thing that came to my mind was, well, what does disruption mean? Because I, frankly, had not really heard disruption until recently used in a positive context. So when I looked up the meaning, and I'm sure somebody else did this earlier as well, this was the definition they gave. I don't see any words on there that seem to be positive, good, pick a synonym, those kinds of things. So then I looked up win. Win seems to be great, but sometimes even with a win, it's only one person who's winning. It's not always that everybody wins. And I found in my travels through Tampa Bay and onward that the most success that I've had has come not when I won, but when I won and everyone else around me also won. So with that, back to the whole disruption word. In the classical sense, yeah, we can probably think of that traffic accident disrupted my routine. I can remember, unfortunately, I was one of those students who was probably a little smarter than my own good, so I disrupted the classroom by doing various things like helping friends rewire the bells in high school, and nothing harm, just to cause a disruption, certainly not, though, in a positive. We have Tampa Bay, we have hurricanes all the time, disrupt our plans, all those things. So what I wanted to find was a way that in innovation, that disruption can be a positive thing. How do we change that word from being a negative, that people think that you're just trying to do something different just because you want to do something different, and not because you're really trying to make a difference or trying to do something even necessarily that changes the world. You just want to be doing something different. And that's what I think where innovation comes in. That by definition, in the disruption of innovation, all of that's really positive. That we're making things easier for people. We're finding technology and things that will make us work better and be able to do more good more of the time. So that's what my goal has always been, is to now, with this word disruption, change that. But honestly, most of us, myself very much included, don't like to be disrupted. We all have our routine. Most of us probably get up in the morning because the alarm disrupts us to get up in the morning. And we have coffee or soda or tea or whatever your caffeine or charge of the day is. And if that gets disrupted, if the power's out, the coffee maker doesn't work, we're pretty disrupted. So changing a behavior pattern, we've all tried it. Who in this room has been on a diet? I have. You don't have to raise your hand, it's okay, I know we all have. Trying to change just one thing, trying to disrupt just one behavior is really difficult, and it takes really conscious effort, and it takes a lot of energy to be able to do that. So it's always easier to do that, in my mind, when you can find a really positive way to do that. I'm better at doing things when I know it's going to help someone else versus when I think it's going to necessarily just help me. And when thinking through that, I like to think of all of the various variables and things that could happen when you disrupt it. So for example, I'm going to start a new workout routine because initially I want to get healthy, right? Well, then my brain says, well, I might be sore tomorrow and tired, and then I might be cranky, and then I'm not going to get this long list of other things done that I was supposed to get done because I disrupted my routine. So trying to find a way as innovators and as business starters and all of those to not only start something just because you can, but in a way that makes it as easy as possible for everyone to come along with us, I think is how we do disruption in a way that changes that connotation to a positive. So I broke it down into 4 areas in terms of business, but this applies to just about everything. Technology, to you name it in the world, there's always these 3 to 4 categories. There's the disruptor. There's the person who has this great idea of we should do this differently, whatever this is. And there's the disruptee, the people, or disruptees, the people who are going to be benefiting, hopefully, from your disruption. Now that can be a negative thing or it can be a good thing. We've all had well, most of us probably had the day in school that we had a test and somebody disrupted the classroom and then you didn't have to take the test anymore. So that was a win for the people who didn't have to take the test anymore. But it wasn't a win for the teacher who had done all this work to help us ultimately be educated. So it can be more complicated than we initially think in terms of coming up with new ideas and how we get the world to change with us. A lot of times in the business world, there's a funder involved, or there's people that have to buy in, whether they're buying your product, or they're angel investors, or they're venture capitalists, or they're Kickstarters. All of those require somebody to believe in what you're doing and to believe that the change, the disruption, is going to be worth it. And then there's the rest of society. There's everybody else who you're going to interact with who may or may not really know what you're doing. I know I told some people today that I was going to go give a TED Talk, and they were like, oh, that's great. What's that? I know, everybody in here knows what TED is, but shockingly, there are a few people who live under a rock who didn't know. So there's always the group who are just not going to be involved at all. So creating the win as a disruptor is coming up with the idea itself first, and then figuring out how to make it apply. So my first company was a home care company. I had gone on to the University of Florida, go Gators, and came back and was getting ready to go on to graduate school and had some family issues come up and wound up having a need to provide care for a family member and didn't have any idea what to do. And somebody said to me, oh, well, you should start a business. I went, well, great. How? You go online in the state of Florida, for those of you who aren't from Florida, it's about $150. You fill out a little form. You're in business. Doesn't work quite that easily when you need to start having money come in. So I had to think about, well, who's going to use me? And I realized I was really young. I had a pre-med degree, not business, not communication, not social media. I do have an iPhone. iPhone's been mentioned a lot today. I have one because my younger brother, who's the technology guru, told me to get one. So how am I going to market this? And what I realized quickly, and because I had to, was it was better for me to go to the people who I wanted to be engaging and find out what they needed, what they wanted, what was going to make their lives easier. And by doing that, they were going to make my life easier because they were going to pay me to provide the service. I tried to find a way to do it that didn't require huge amounts of lifestyle changes, both on behalf of my employees and on behalf of my clients, trying to find the easiest way for people to make a change and then to start moving them forward. And then with the end result, like what's the end goal for each new disruption that we're creating? And through all of that and through subsequent companies, what I again realized is that when you have the idea and the disruption, you're super excited. And I was always just blown away that people didn't think the way I did initially. Everybody should agree with me, right? And by finding that I can go toward them first, figure out where they're at, and walk back with them towards what I thought the disruption should be, versus pulling them across, standing over on the disrupted side, and like kind of throwing them a lifeline and being like, come on. Or you have your friend who's like on the other side of the restaurant, and you always wait for them to come to your seat because you're in the best seat, but they've just come in and they're still trying to figure out where everything is. It's that kind of feeling. It's going to the person or to the group or to the cohort and bringing them back with you. We have to make the change worth it. That's that whole point, again, of the energy expelled, the energy to change your routine, to start a new workout, to start a new diet, to start a new business, to do anything. You have to see that end result through all of that chaos. There's always the unknown of, well, how am I going to do this? This is different than my normal routine. And I'll use, because I started a home care company, the healthcare example. Most of our records have gone digital now, which is wonderful because we have all this access and we can see all these new doctors and get their opinions and all of those things we didn't used to be able to do. But when you look at that process, it's really been a long challenge of getting everyone involved. I had somebody come to me a couple weeks ago with an idea for a new app that they wanted to have everybody use to manage their medical records. And I said, well, that's great, but are the doctors, is this easier for the doctors to use? Because most of us have a hard time communicating with our doctors to begin with. And if we're going to ask them to do one more thing, it's probably not going to be to sign onto our app or whatever this requires. And what about the nurses that are so overworked already, and they already have 600 systems they have to figure out how to use, and how are they going to make that fit better? What about the record keepers and the patients? So really thinking about each and every person who's going to be touching what it is that you're disrupting and how it's going to affect them. And by figuring all of that out is how you make it a win for everyone, not just you as the disruptor, but for the whole group. With funders, what I'd like to do, because I've obviously dealt with a lot of them, both in the nonprofit world and in the for-profit world, is finding out what it is they like, what makes them tick. Money is one of the things. It's certainly not life, but it's a lot of life. Almost everything we do somehow revolves around money. You flew on a plane to get here, or drove your car, you put gas in it, you ate food this morning, we're sitting in an air conditioning room. Everything at some point comes back to that we have to have money to exist. And so when asking somebody to part with that money, if it's about something that's passionate for them, that's a so much easier sell than trying to sell to the person or picking the funder because you looked on a list. All these lists come out of the richest people in your area, and businesses and nonprofits often target them. They're the hit list, and they get invited to all of these things. But if it's not their interest, if they're not interested in saving the dogs and cats of the world, we shouldn't be inviting them to that fundraiser. Find what it is that they're interested in. Same thing in the business world. I've been shocked at the number of conversations that I've had over the years in picking and choosing and working with investors, that it was really about finding out what it is that they wanted to change in the world. They could take my ideas and their capital, and we could make great things happen because I took the time to figure out how to make it a win for them, how they could be invested in that as well. And with society, I was looking up some research, obviously, to do this, and came on the whole thought about credit cards and debit cards, because it's something that, for me, have existed since I was old enough to use money. I bought a credit card or a debit card attached to my bank account. And this isn't about currency. This is just about the technology itself. So when I looked it up, credit cards, the first time the word credit card has been traced to be used was in 1887. Right? Was everybody shocked? I was. And it was written in a book, and it was used 12 times. And after that, they developed these coins that they put on their keychains, and that was kind of like the credit card idea, that this coin attached to your keychain would have the information that resulted in a currency exchange. Well, nowadays, you go places, and if you don't have, having cash is a rarity. I know I hardly ever carry this paper we called cash. I use my card for everything. And if you're not from this area, there's a few restaurants still here that don't take credit cards. And it's kind of an awkward moment when you realize that they don't take credit cards, and you hope somebody in the room that you know has brought cash so that you'll be okay. But that's been a cultural evolution, and it's happened a lot over the last 20 to 30 years. As your valet, everything that we use and touch now is really credit card driven. That's an example of using technology and you creating a disruption that created a win because more people could go into business. People who worked at home could go into business because they could do these exchanges over the internet and be able to make money and be able to procure a living without having to meet the person and exchange these pieces of paper we called cash. They're also really germy, so I'm really good with the credit card thing too because you can clean it. The current market part, though, when disruption and thinking about disruption, I ask that we always be mindful of the people who were disrupting, and if it's something that's going to then become outdated. So the cash makers of the world, well, they're probably still okay for now, but at some point, we'll be out of trees, we'll be out of cash, we'll be out of opportunities for them, And wouldn't it be a better win to find how we can take them with us? How can we help them at least have the opportunity? They can choose to say no, but to have a win for them as well. Let's bring them along with us instead of just looking for a disruption that makes something outdated and then is no longer useful and sits in a junkyard somewhere. Let's create the win for that as well. The win can be everywhere. It doesn't have to be in just one place. So in my mind, win-wins ultimately come down to thinking about everyone involved. And I'll use a little bit of my personal experience to talk just very quickly about social enterprise, because I think that's the piece of, especially in the technology and in disruption world, that could really marry together quite nicely. Social enterprise is the idea of nonprofits owning a for-profit, or nonprofits having the budget line from a for-profit. And what better win is there if you have an idea that's, especially if it helps something in the social service world or in the nonprofit world, that's a great entry to the market. You have an instant audience. You can be helping a social cause at the same time that you're creating your business and your model. And that's another option that I think a lot of people just don't think about, but it's becoming a way. There's these new legislation that's passed in now 17 states called B corporations that build in this social thought process. So I encourage you as you go through your life and you go through all the different opportunities to really find the win, to find the win in everything that we're doing. And the win, again, doesn't mean, I got first place and you lost, unless it's football and then the Gators win and the rest lose. But other than that, it's always good to find the win in what we're doing, not only for us, but for everyone else. I'll leave you with a quote that I cheated and put up on the screen. People who work together will win, whether it be against complex football defenses or the problems of modern society. Thank you very much.